Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Adoptions from the Heart TV. I'm your host, Amanda Aliberti. Today, we are joined by Thomas and his mother, Colleen. Colleen adopted Thomas through our agency almost 19 years ago, and they are here to discuss Thomas's relationship with his birth mom. So welcome, Thomas and Colleen.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So I'm going to actually start with you, Thomas. Can you share with our audience when you first kind of learned about your adoption story and maybe started asking some questions about your birth parents?
So whenever I've talked to people about my adoption, that's always the question I enjoy answering the most, because I think my mom did the best thing she could have, which was she told me as soon as I could understand. And even probably before I could understand, which sort of removed the stigma around adoption for me. I probably started to ask questions, I would say probably around 7 or 8, around how the process works. But I think I understood what adoption was around 5.
So Colleen, can you share, as a response to what Thomas just shared of him inquiring, what allowed you to create a space where you were talking about adoption and birth parents from an early age for Thomas?
What I found to be very helpful was to talk to him when he was a newborn, when he was a baby, and talk to him about his birth story. I knew he didn't understand completely, but we would say prayers, for example, and I would say, and let's pray for your birth mother, and let's talk a little bit about what she's like. And I remember her favorite color was orange if I saw something. So just talking about it in a very natural way, knowing that he's not going to fully understand. And then when he did get a little bit older and said, well, wait a minute, I think you said something like, I thought you were my mom. And then we talked a little bit about the difference between me being his mother and the mother he was born to. And, he's a smart guy. So he just really put it all together and understood, so that it became a very natural part of the conversation. And talking about the birth story, which is super exciting for us and joyful. It's just like one of those things you tell over and over again. Tell me again about that day.
And at what age did you guys have at what age was Thomas when you were able to have a connection to his birth parent? How old were you when that happened?
Were you 14 maybe?
I thought I was about 16.
Okay. So up until 16, you had never met your birth parent. You never really had any inquiry to her understanding, just general information that maybe the agency provided your mom and dad about her story.
Yeah. So one thing is, when my birth mother put me up for adoption, she filled out a form that described her interests and things about her. I would say that's one of the most important things that my birth mother did, because it helped me to really find a better connection to her without meeting her at the time.
Yeah. I think you're probably referencing, we have both a self-reported medical background packet as well as a physical social profile that we encourage birth parents to fill out, regardless if they're going to want any sort of openness. And it sounds like for you, even though you didn't have the contact with her, having those papers gave you a better understanding of who she is.
Absolutely, it did.
That's great. Talk to me about when you connected with your birth parent later on in life at the age of 16. How did that interaction go?
So I first came into contact with my birth mother through social media. Ended up finding a profile of hers, sending a message, and just seeing how she would feel about developing a closer relationship with me. And eventually we decided we were going to have lunch. So I drove down to near where she was staying at the time in Wilmington, and we sat down and had a great lunch together and just learned a lot about each other and how our lives were going.
Yeah.
Weirdly, I told my mom this, that I felt like I knew her when I met her, which was very interesting to me.
And Colleen, how did you feel about that first meetup at the age of 16? He was interested in learning more about his birth mom. He found her on social media. What thoughts or emotions were going through your head?
I was really excited. I mean, I will admit I was a tiny bit nervous when I first reached out because it was really out of the blue. I didn't even explain who I was. I just said, it's Colleen and Chris, my husband, and Thomas would like to have a conversation with you, or however I put it. And she answered right away. It was almost like as if she was waiting for it, like, hey, how I've been thinking about you, type of thing. So that went really well. And I think in the beginning, I may have done a lot of the, communication, and then I kind of handed it off, like you guys exchanged cell phone numbers, I think, and Instagram accounts. And then it just kind of took off. And before the first meeting, I was just so excited.
Yeah. So you've had this relationship with your birth mom over the last few years where you directly correspond with her. Is that right, Thomas?
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
What has that meant for you to have that relationship with your birth mom?
It's been something really special to me. It's one of the best decisions I made in my life to create that connection and reunite myself with her.
I'm going to ask you a tough question, but this oftentimes comes up in adoption, so I'm going to ask it anyway. When you were thinking about having this relationship or connection to your birth mom, were you at all feeling worried or guilty about how this may affect your parents that you grew up with?
Luckily, I know my parents very well, so I was fairly confident that no issues would arise from it. Mm-hmm. But I mean, thought was in my head at some point about how is this going to affect my relationship with my parents.
Yeah. And for you, Colleen, I think there is this myth with families of, oh gosh, if my child ever wants to have a relationship with his birth parent, that means he's not going to love me anymore, or he's going to want to go live with his birth parent over us. And sometimes these emotions go through you of like, what is this going to mean for our family if my child wants to build a connection to his or her birth family? Talk to me a little bit about your response to that.
I guess I understand that fear, but you have to kind of know our family and sort of the closeness that we do have. And I mean, I've always felt my feelings towards Thomas's birth mother were more like she was part of our family. So it just, even though we had no communication with her, I always thought deeply about her and wanted to get to know her more because of her connection with my son. It's kind of like one big happy thing. And obviously it doesn't always turn out that way, but I don't know. It never made me afraid because I know Thomas, he's a very mature kid. And I know he's capable of loving many people. And it just never really occurred to me to be afraid of that.
Yeah. Thomas, what advice would you give other adoptees who are maybe curious to reach out to their birth family or start that process of trying to search for them, but are scared? What happens if I reach out and they're not there, or they don't respond, or they don't want a relationship with me? What advice would you give them?
So in my experience talking to my birth mother and also talking to other adoptees, I have built a relationship while in college with a lot of other adopted kids, many of whom who have made connections with their birth families. And it's generally a good experience for everyone who has made that connection. And I would say, some say ignorance is bliss, but I don't really subscribe to that. I'd rather know personally.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think it's fabulous that 16 years later, you were able to connect with your birth mom. You obviously have this great bond with her, and that's going to continue to grow. What are your expectations for the future with her?
So in the future, I'd love to deepen my connection with that side of my family, like maybe meet some of my other relatives. I have a half sister who I'd very much like to meet. I know a lot about her, but I haven't met her. So I think that is going to be the next step in my journey.
Wonderful. And we're hopeful that you can have this access to your birth family and more people to love you and more people for you to love. So that's truly beautiful.
What I've heard from other people who've adopted and are adoptive families is there's a magic age to sort of facilitate meeting the birth family. And 18 seems to be the age that I hear a lot. I don't really think there's a magic age. I think it's really when your child is ready, and kids are ready at different points of their life. And, I have another a son who is part of our family. And, his age might not be till he's older than, 18 or younger. It doesn't matter. I guess it just when your child is ready is the answer.
And Colleen, can you discuss your role in Thomas having a relationship with his birth mom and what advice you would give other adoptive parents whose child is kind of at that age of embarking on their birth story?
Well, for me, it was always all about Thomas. It was what he wanted and how he wanted to go about it. I definitely would have been with him if he wanted me there for that first meeting, but he didn't want me there. He wanted to do this on his own. And so I was more than happy to let that happen. I trust him, and I guess I trust her as well. And I want them to savor that relationship. It's not really about me. So I kind of step back and just try to be there when I'm needed.
I mean, that's truly beautiful, because I think sometimes people lose sight of the bigger picture of what is in the best interest of that adoptee, right? Of that child, of that young adult, and your ability to love your child enough to let him do what's right for him shows your commitment as a parent in general. So that's wonderful.
And I should add, my husband's in full agreement. I know he's not here right now.
That's great.
Yeah.
Is there anything else either of you would like to add to the conversation of just adoptees searching for their birth parents, especially later on in life?
I guess to state again what I said before was, it's the best decision I ever made. And I love having a relationship with my birth mother. And it's just, I'm so glad that I made the decision to make that step.
Yeah, that's great. Anything for you, Colleen?
Just, for anybody else who's maybe worried about it, it's all about your child, and be there for them. And, not every story might have the same ending, but, you just keep that bond with your child and support them with whatever they want.
Yeah,
really.
And just reminding our audience that open adoption is not just one point in time. There are waves to open adoption, and birth parents in the beginning may not want a connection for various reasons, right? Maybe they're not in the place in their life that they can have a relationship or want to meet child or be connected to the adoptive family. But there may be moments down the road that they come back, or you reach out to them and then they're ready. And then maybe something may happen down the road that they have to pull back again because things are going on in their lives. And just being respectful of that and allowing that birth parent to come forward if and when she or he is ready. And as adoptive parents, allowing your child to have that connection when he or she is ready too, right? That's kind of the bigger picture of what we're all doing here. So we're appreciative of parents like Colleen who create a safe space for their child to feel like they can have a relationship with their birth parent if and when they want it. And for adoptees like you, Thomas, who are brave enough to be honest about your feelings. You seem like a pretty mature kind of guy, and we're grateful that you have been able to connect with your birth parent and have this really great relationship. So thank you for sharing your story, guys. Our adoption community is always thankful to hear personal experiences with adoption, and we hope you guys continue to tune in. Thanks so much, and take care.